And I said, I don't want to leave. I wish I could stay longer. Is this really what I want to be doing? Am I happy? Everyone would come up to us and pinch our cheeks, and they thought we were weird looking. So I look so much like a person who doesn't speak Tagalog, and that's the language that I speak, by the way. I do travel a lot. I fly back and forth in the United States.
Hey YouTube, Alex here, and in today's video we are meeting with my good friend Kevin. Kevin is an American who is from the United States. However, Kevin actually spent a good chunk of his childhood here in the Philippines as his family was here engaging in a mission. And so Kevin has this kind of third culture. I do apologize for the background noise. If I look a bit stressed out at times, there was some construction noise in the background. Hope you'll forgive that and enjoy this interview with Kevin. So without further ado, let's get into it. Kevin is a production sound engineer, and he wanted to put the shout out. If you are looking to hire somebody for that purpose in the United States, feel free to reach out to him. We'll have his contact information as well as his YouTube channel linked below. Thank you so much today, Kevin, for joining us. We have Kevin with us here today. He's from the United States, but he actually has a long history here in the Philippines. So, Kevin, if you could introduce yourself,
Sure.
please.
My name's Kevin. I was born in the United States, but came over here to the Philippines when I was 6 years old. My parents became missionaries here and brought our whole family here in the 1980s. So it's been a long time, going back 40 years. I lived here a total of, I think, 10 or 11 years, and then I left and went back to the US for college. And then over the course of the next decades, I came back and visited several times, and it's always been a part of me. It's kind of formed who I am as a person. And so I visited several times, and then finally in 2022, I decided that I really wanted to come over here on a more regular basis. And I met my girlfriend Angie, who I love very much now, and now we have an apartment here in Dumaguete. So it's been, let's see, now this will be going into the third year of being consistently here in the Philippines. And I call it being semi-retired because I'm still working. So I'm trying my best to, work both worlds, where I keep my job in the US and then I have my place here in the Philippines. And then the goal is to someday retire here full time, whenever I can figure out how to pull that off. It might be another 10 years from now.
You're doing what I think I call the Tim Ferriss plan. So a lot of people would say, oh, Kevin, you're way too young to be retired. How dare you? And Tim Ferriss talks about you shouldn't wait until you're 67 to retire, because you can't guarantee your health at 67. We like to think it's going to be perfect, but sometimes life goes in a different direction than our plans. You're getting to enjoy time here, activities here that may be out of reach at a different point. So I think it's really important to note that, because like I said, we hope for the best, but things aren't perfect. What attracted you to Dumaguete? I know in previous conversations you'd mentioned having spent time in Manila. What about Dumaguete has appealed to you?
Sure, yeah. Before I get to that answer, I just wanted to say one more thing about the timing of my travel back to the Philippines. There was a span of about 10 years, 8 years actually. It was 2014 was my last visit. And in 2014, I was lucky to be hired by a company, Christian charity organization called Samaritan's Purse. And Typhoon Haiyan, or Yolanda, had just come through and devastated Leyte and other places around in that area. And so we went in as a media team, and I was paid to be there. They paid for my airline tickets, and I came over and we spent 10 days in the Philippines. And my visit before that was 2006. So 2006 to 14, what is that, 8 years? So it was a huge gap. And it was that visit that kind of reawakened my love of the Philippines. It was always there, and I hadn't forgotten it. It was just that I was reminded how much I love this country and the people and the culture, and how much I understand the culture and literally some of the language. So 2014, we're in Leyte, we're in Tacloban, and I was keeping a diary and a diary entry on my phone, just casually. And on the last day, it was well, we got to go back today. And I said, I don't want to leave. I wish I could stay longer. I just don't want to go back to the States. I want to stay here longer. So that seed in 2014 was planted, and it was always in the background. And right around pandemic time, 2021, was when I really wanted to come back, and I couldn't because of the pandemic, because of the lockdown. And so finally in 2022, I came through, and there's one other thing that I want to add before we get to like my search for where I wanted to live and what island and stuff, and that was something that happens to you when you can get in your 40s, and that is, they used to talk about it it's called the midlife crisis. And I remember hearing about this my whole life. You know, it was always like almost like a cliche. You know, the guy who's in his mid 40s has an affair and runs off with the secretary and buys a sports car. And I just remember it was this thing, you know, and people made fun of it. Well, I feel like it's actually a real thing. There's something that happens maybe to a man. I'm generalizing big time here, but this is just for the point of the illustration, is that I felt like I felt it, and it was like this mid 40s thing where you're like, is this really what I want to be doing? Am I happy with my current situation, with work, my life, my relationships, everything? Or is there something else that I can try to seek and seek after? And I can verify this because I've spoken to some of my friends, specifically, like, I'm not going to name them, I don't want to embarrass them, but like a classmate and somebody who I grew up with, who was like, he's like, yeah, did I ever tell you about my sailboat fantasy? And I said, no, what are you talking about? He goes, man, I just went through this phase where all I wanted to do was just run off and go on a sailboat and sail around the world. And I was like, oh, interesting. I was like, so you had some of those same feelings that just manifested in a different way. And mine was return to the Philippines, return to your roots, return to where you remember being young and having adventures and just the love of the Philippines and the people here. So that's what brought me back. And to circle back now to Dumaguete, in the summer of 22, I really did a little bit of revisiting at first. I looked up some old friends, I traveled, and I started where I had lived. I started in the Manila area, and I started in Batangas, which is in Luzon, and I went to Mindoro, and I kind of sort of island hopped a little bit, and I thought, you know what, I've never been to the Visayas, I've never been to Bohol, I've never seen the Chocolate Hills or the Tarsiers, and so I started island hopping around, and I couldn't go everywhere, obviously, because there was only a few weeks, but I said one of the places that's getting a lot of buzz is Dumaguete and Negros, because there's a lot of YouTubers talking about it. So Dumaguete was last on my list, and I came here and checked it out, and I rented a motorcycle. I was staying in a couple of hotels like a lot of guys do, and I just met a lot of cool people, and I went to some nice restaurants, and I checked out the diving, and then I checked out some of the history here that happened with World War II, and I found the Kataal Museum in Valencia, and I was like, man, this is so cool. And it just was like sort of a nice little package for me of things that I loved and appreciated. The provincial feeling, not the skyscrapers of BGC, but you know, the kind of streets and roads that don't have traffic lights and stoplights. And you can, you know, get on your motorbike and in maybe 15, 20 minutes be at a dive resort, or in another 15, 20 minutes go up the mountain and be at a beautiful waterfalls or something like that. That really appealed to me, and it reminded me of what the Philippines was like back in the 80s. So Dumaguete was the choice for me, and then I ended up dragging Angie here. She was in Quezon City working, and I said, do you want to go to Dumaguete and share a place there with me? And she said yes, of course, and she loves it here now. So we're very happy, and it's a good base point for traveling in other places. So, you know, sometimes we do have to take a plane to Manila and then from somewhere else, but you can take a boat from here to different places like, you know, Siquijor and just different Cebu and things like that. So it is a good central point in the Visayas to branch out from.
Angie, your girlfriend, she's from Luzon, or she spent a good chunk of her life in Luzon.
She was born in Manila, but she
it.
grew up in different places in the Philippines.
Got it. Okay, because I think that's something that a lot of people may not think about. Is they think, you know, a lot of people are based here in Dumaguete, but they don't understand. There's a big chunk of people that come here who are from other parts of the Philippines.
Sure.
That you get this interesting cross section of people. Where when I first landed here, my host family, the parents in the host family were from Zamboanga and Mindanao, but they had lived in Manila, they had lived in Bacolod, so they really had seen a lot. You know, I think sometimes there's a perception, everybody in Dumaguete is from Dumaguete or from another place a lot of people here come from is like Bayuan, but no, you get people from like all over the country because it's such a cool place to live.
Sure. Absolutely, and the schools draw in the young people, right? You have all these colleges here,
Yeah.
Lots of college. It's a college town. You know, business opportunities, you said, people from smaller cities coming to the bigger city. It's growing all the time, and I say that in a good way, not like a, they're not putting skyscrapers up yet, but they're expanding the boulevard, and new businesses are opening up all the time. Yeah, and there are Filipinos who come here and have summer homes.
Yeah.
Like wealthy Filipinos from the mainland
Yeah.
will come and have a summer home, and that's pretty cool that they chose this area to do that.
The thing that I like about Dumaguete is even 6 months in, of course I've only been here 6 months, although I've had a previous visit to the Philippines, it still maintains this sense of mystery for me. There's always, like, I still have this sense I'm in this like rainforest and there's interesting characters, and like it just feels like such an adventure for me even 6 months in. And I don't even ride a motorbike, so I don't get out of the city much, but even so, you lived a lot of years in the Philippines. Does it still have that sense of adventure for you? Is that part of why you've branched out from where you lived in Luzon?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're in a country where there's just like it's a tropical rainforest.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of mountains and waterfalls and stuff to explore. There's beautiful diving in the ocean. I mean, you're in a paradise, and when you look at other places in the world that maybe people like to live or visit, like for example, like Hawaii, it's so expensive compared to places like the Philippines, and you get a similar experience for much less money because it's just not that expensive here as it is in those kinds of places. Yeah, adventure. I mean, what kind of fun? It's subjective, right? It's to each person what is fun and adventurous to them. But to me, taking my girlfriend to Palawan and visiting the underground river and the caves there was fantastic. I mean, there's not a lot of places like that in the world. It's a World Heritage Site. That's a cool adventure, and you have to fly there to get there, and you have to get a hotel, and you have to travel, but it was so worth it. I feel like there's an endless amount of things to do in the Philippines, just on that kind of stuff.
Can you speak a bit about your experience on being third culture in Batangas?
I feel like I wanted to add one thing about, being with people. You were talking about walking back at midnight from being out. It just reminded me that there's a standard greeting that Filipinos will say to each other when they see each other outside, and it's not like, "Hey, how's it going?" It's "Saan ka galing," which is, "Oh, where are you coming from?" So already it's almost like a story. It's like, "Hey, tell us your story." They're invested in you as a person. It's not like, "What's up?" or "Hey," or like in the United States, it's very common to say, "Hey, how are you?" And you say, "Oh, I'm great," and they're not great. It's just a standard. But here in the Philippines, it's like, "Oh, where are you coming from? What have you been doing?" They're very invested and interested in you as a person, and it's not just superficial. It's actually real, and I think that's really sweet. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. Growing up in Batangas, I came to the Philippines when I was 6 years old, a little kid. My sister was a year and a half younger than me, so she's 4, about to turn 5. We were in a provincial area in Batangas, Lipa, Batangas, actually. And my parents put us in a school that was an English school. In other words, the teachers taught in English, but we were the only kids who were not Filipino in that school. We were the only foreigners or foreign nationals in that school. And so we were almost like little aliens. And everyone would come up to us and pinch our cheeks, and they thought we were weird looking. And the funny story about the language and the culture is that initially my sister and I did not want to learn Tagalog or Filipino. We were resisting it because we spoke English. And I remember my sister specifically being frustrated because she said, "I don't want to learn this dumb language, it's too hard." Oh, that's right, we were in school. And so my sister and I didn't want to learn the language, but after a few months, we soaked up the Tagalog. Our minds were like little sponges, and we couldn't help but learn it. We also absorbed the culture at that time. So it wasn't just words and language and how to speak, it was like how Filipinos act and the way they treat each other, and the way they respect their elders, everything, just being Filipino. And that's different from your being a kid in your home country. And if I fast forward to the story about when I was back in high school, there's like a cultural thing in the Philippines where if someone offers you something, like a free gift or just something small, it's kind of traditional to say no first, maybe even no 2 or 3 times before you say yes. And so my funny story is I was in a class, I think it was a computer lab, and I forgot to bring a little jump drive disk that I needed for the class. And one of my classmates, this is in America, said, well, I have an extra one, do you want one? And I told him, oh no, I couldn't possibly. And I was waiting for him to offer it again. Well, the kid turned to me and said, okay, fine, if you don't want it, fine. And I was like, oh! Like, because I'm Filipino in my thinking. I'm thinking he's going to offer it to me again, but he didn't. So that's an example of one of the examples of being a third culture kid is your brain has been rewired to this other culture, and it's different when you go back to your home country. So that was one of probably a couple dozen examples of what it was like, growing up in the Philippines and being a kid here, and yeah.
You talked a little bit about how some people they become so accustomed to the Philippines, they want to spend more and more time here as an adult. And I think that's kind of like, I don't know, maybe a bit contrary to what we talk about in the States. Like, I grew up in the South. You have a lot of people that are part of various Christian denominations. A lot of them go on missions. And it seemed like the context presented to me was that it was such a hardship to go on the mission. Oh, I would never go back. Even though I love the people, even though it was an enriching experience, I could never go back. And yet it's very different for you in that you love the Philippines and you see it as a continuing part of your story.
Right. I mean, it's kind of hard unless you've traveled to that other country and experienced how different it is from yours. It's really hard to imagine what it's like. But when you're a kid and you grew up here, things like power outages or literally coup d'etats of the government, things like that happen, and you sort of just take it in stride because you're a kid. Bugs being in your house, what else? Different tropical weird diseases that you might get. You might get sick, and that's not a disease or an illness that you would normally get in your home country because you're just not exposed to it. Those kinds of things all happened to us when we were growing up. And so for someone else to come to a country on a short-term trip, be it for, like a missions trip or business or whatever, those things can be very shocking to them. So they're in their house that they're staying at, and there's a bunch of ants eating their stuff that they just left out for 1 minute. Like, what is going on? And then the power goes out, or the water isn't available, or whatever. I like to think that because I grew up here, I'm more naturally suited and totally more easygoing about that kind of stuff because I grew up with it. Yeah, unless you had that experience, it can be a little bit of a shock when you come over here because you're just not used to that kind of environment. Temperature, well, being in the South, there are times when it's hotter and more humid in Savannah, Georgia than it is where I am in Dumaguete. I've checked, There's different people in different walks of life who have their opportunities to have an experience and engage a different culture and a different people and a different lifestyle. So you have people like me who came over when I was a little kid. You might have people who are in their teens or early 20s who are here on a missions trip or a visit with family. And then you have older guys who are in that midlife crisis mode maybe, who are thinking there's got to be something else out there for me. So every once in a while, especially here in Dumaguete, we come across people like that.
And so you ran into a guy that may have been in that situation the other night at a restaurant here in town. Can you share a bit about that experience of being the sounding board for this gentleman?
It's just really interesting meeting different people and finding out why they come here and their motivations. And here in Dumaguete especially, I mean, if you're watching this video, it's probably because you're interested in Dumaguete and you're thinking to yourself, maybe I should come check this place out. So there was a night that I was out with my girlfriend having dinner, and we were listening to a live band, and there was an older gentleman sitting behind me, and I say older because I felt like he was probably in his late 60s, early 70s. And at one point I got up actually to use the restroom, and he kind of stopped me and he was like, "Hey man," he's like, "Can I ask you a question? Where are you from? Back in the U.S." I guess he knew I was an American. But anyway, and I talked to him a little bit and told him where I was from, and I got the picture that he actually was in the process of deciding if he wanted to move here full time or not. I just got this vibe that he was seeking something. He was seeking answers, and he was like, "How do you like it here? And why did you come here?" And I just remember talking to him just maybe for like a minute or two, and at one point he said, almost to himself, he was like, yeah, you know what, I got a lot of motorcycles back in the States. You know, like he was thinking about like weighing his options, like, oh, if I come to the Philippines, I'm gonna have to get rid of a lot of belongings, a lot of stuff that's special to me. And then he was almost like weighing whether or not he should let go of that stuff and just come here and start his life over. Anyway, I got up to use the bathroom, and when I came back, he was gone. And I remember thinking, wow, was that guy literally making a decision right then and that night, in that moment, whether or not he was gonna move here or not? I think he came out to check it out, and he was trying to talk to people and get their opinions and stuff. And I think he was trying to make his decision right there, whether or not he was going to do it. And I actually don't know what his decision was because he was gone when I came back. But it was interesting. It's interesting seeing the psychological process, like, you know, and maybe people who are watching this video right now are in that moment. Maybe you're trying to say, you know, do I want to come all the way to the Philippines to Dumaguete and experience this? And of course, I'm biased. I'm going to say, heck yeah, come out here.
Give it a try.
You know, Alex is here, you know, living his life, enjoying, and while you figure out what you're going to do with your next steps. I've met a beautiful girlfriend here, and I'm very happy here. I'm going to keep going back and forth as long as I can until I can stay here, you know, permanently.
And I think that's something that a lot of people have told me about is like, Alex, you know, you could get into contract-based work. There's no rule against that. And a lot of people, I think, if they had their ideal lifestyle, they would go back and forth. There's things I miss about the States. I don't talk about it as much. I don't think it's as relevant. But and then when I'm in the States, there's a lot I miss about being in Philippines, being in Southeast Asia. So you really get the best of both worlds, I think. Now, of course, I think long-term you're thinking you want to stay here, you know, focus on being here, but you're also making prudent decisions, right?
Trying to.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you still have a career, I've been working in film and television for 13 years. This will be my 14th year. It's really hard to stop that, especially when I feel like I've been achieving like moderate success, you know, like I'm happy with my growth in the business. And I don't want to just stop all that because it was a lot of effort to get it going and get it started.
It's a very competitive industry.
Yeah, it's competitive, but it's also the kind of industry where if you stop and take a break, it's easy for you to lose your contacts, and it's kind of like a business where everything is based on what you did last. So if you say, yeah, I haven't worked in 5 years, they go, huh? You know, who are you? You're starting over. So
Technology's changed. And
yeah, a little bit, not so much with sound, but it's more about the contacts and the people in the industry that you know, and then they know you, and you're reliable, and whenever they call you, you're there. And if you suddenly disengage from that and unplug, then it's kind of like hard to restart. So that would be something that I'd have to seriously consider if I stopped before retirement age. And also, I do enjoy the work. Like, most of the projects I work on are really kind of cool and kind of fun. So
your job sounds freaking cool, man. Like, you probably, of all the people I've talked to and interviewed, I think you probably have the coolest job. And maybe just because I'm a YouTuber, so I'm kind of a nerd about, you know, producing content.
Well, depending on whatever the focus of this video is, you may not want to get into movie making business, but it's up to you. I'm happy to talk about anything because I love to blab. So. But I like what you were going down a road of like culture and Philippines and that stuff.
Are there things that you appreciate about the Philippines as an adult that you maybe didn't notice when you were a kid here?
I remember thinking now as an adult, like just comprehending traveling and distance and driving. You know, when I was in high school, my last year of being here full time, I was a senior in high school. And I finally was able to drive our family's car, our vehicle, and I got to drive around Metro Manila, which is not easy. But when I was growing up as a kid, I didn't have a sense of the scale of traveling from, you know, even like Manila to Batangas. I just knew it was like a long time in the car, but I wasn't thinking about how many kilometers or how many hours it was. It's interesting coming back as an adult and realizing, oh, to go from point A to point B, I have to do this, and like just using Google Maps or whatever, you know, apps on your phone to map and drive. That's been kind of cool and kind of exciting. I actually like renting cars here. I don't own a car. I have a motorcycle, but when I travel somewhere that's like on an island super far away, like we go down to Mindanao or something, I always rent a car and then I drive around, and I get a sense of the scale and distance that I never had when I was a kid. That's just like a kind of a practical example, but what's another one? relationships. Like my parents before were always the ones who hired someone to fix something. Well, now it's me, right? So I'm their age or older than their age. Hiring someone to come weld bars on your windows. Why would I have ever done that as a kid in school? My dad would always handle that. So hiring someone to help us clean the apartment, a gardener, whatever, those kinds of things. Now I'm managing things like that as a grown-up, whereas I never had to do that before as a kid. Someone always took care of that. I mean, and really, like a lot of the traveling around, you know, like when you're a kid, you're in school, you just get on a bus and you go somewhere. And you go to
the adults driving.
Yeah, it's someone else, or they've hired drivers for the buses, and we're all going on an outdoor education thing for 1 week, and you're going from here to Taal Lake or whatever, you know, whatever it is. And all of that now is you got to handle it yourself, and you got to pay for it yourself. So now there's the money piece too. It's like, how much does this cost? And those are some of the differences of being, you know, a kid versus being an adult here.
Certainly the Philippines is more costly these days than it was when you were growing up. Everywhere is, but I think that the difference being too that you notice, wow, okay, so instead of my folks covering this expense or it being, or you getting a bulk rate even, right? I mean, if you go on a group trip somewhere with your school, like you're getting a student price, like right. Where the adult doesn't get the price break, right? Something that made me laugh, have you ever pranked a Filipino person, because of course you speak Tagalog, have you ever pranked them because they're thinking, oh, this gentleman, he's you know, from the States and he may not speak? Have you ever done that before? I
feel like I do it a little bit often because I just look so like foreign, or I look so much like a person who doesn't speak Tagalog, and that's the language that I speak, by the way, Filipino or Tagalog. I don't really speak the other dialects. Yeah, but the Tagalog one is always a shock to them, and so it's always fun to kind of like surprise them, especially if I can do it in special ways. So going back to, again, high school times, I had taken a summer job. It was a summer work program through our school, and I was working at a music store, actually. It was called RJ Guitars. It's still around in Metro Manila, RJ Guitars. And the first day I reported for work, I was walking in the door of the store, and the manager, who was going to be my manager, happened to be on the phone. And she was saying in Tagalog, oh, he's coming in now. Oh, wow, he's really tall and he's kind of handsome. And then I answered back in Tagalog, yeah, and I speak Tagalog too. And she was so embarrassed. I was just trying to tease her because, you know, she didn't know. She just thought I was a high school kid from another country who didn't know the language. And then the other examples, which are countless, is just interacting with people on a regular basis. I love to tease them and joke, and I often embarrass Angie because I say something corny or cheesy, but it's in Tagalog, and they always get a laugh out of it. I get a laugh out of it. And most of the time, it's been super helpful because there's times when English, even though English is very widely spoken here, there's times when Filipinos struggle with their English and they get nervous about saying something and so as soon as you kind of break the ice and let them know that you speak some Tagalog, they kind of like are at ease. And so I just do that out of convenience sometimes. I don't want to see them, you know, struggle and worry about their English. But here in Dumaguete, sometimes it's tough because there are times when Angie will tell me, like, they don't understand your Tagalog. And I was like, oh man, like I really wish that they all understood Tagalog as fluently as I do, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes their Tagalog is about the same or less than my level. And my level is very simple, like the kind of Tagalog that kids speak to each other. So it's not very deep. But most of the time it works and it's been fun.
Kevin, you recently have talked about Dauin, your commitment to Dauin. You know, you're a guy that you could live anywhere in Dumaguete, anywhere in the Philippines really, but you chose Dumaguete, but more specifically you chose Dauin. What's the appeal of Dauin to you over maybe say some of the other areas? Not that it's a competition, but you know, we each have our area that kind of fits our preferences. Why'd you pick Dauin? Right,
so Dauin is this area about 30 minutes southwest of Dumaguete, and it's easy to find. You just go down the national highway and you kind of stick right to the coast. You can see the ocean to your left when you're going down there. And it's a concentration of a lot of the dive resorts. And I learned to scuba dive in 2004. I got my certification back then, and then I've been slowly working on additional certifications, and then here in the Philippines, I got my tech diving certificate, which allows me to go a little bit deeper and use mixed gases and things like that. So Dauin for me is like a diving community first and foremost, but also at those dive resorts are some really nice restaurants. So just peppered throughout the coastline there are tons of great little restaurants for you to explore. Oddly enough, some of the best pizza I ever had in Dumaguete was down there. There's like a resort might have like a world-class chef working in their kitchen, and you're just like, wow, what are you doing here? But they're there. So that was one of the things that just drew me down there to explore it initially. And then I started looking at the building boom, I call it a building boom, that's going on in that area. And you know, there's YouTubers that have been posting their progress of their builds, and they start up on the hill and they go up the mountain in elevation of, you know, hundreds of meters, and then from that vantage point you really have this beautiful view of the ocean and an island out there called Apo Island, which is a sanctuary, marine sanctuary, and has wonderful snorkeling and scuba diving. So I kind of fell in love with the idea of like, what if I was able to build a house someday on this mountainside overlooking the ocean? It's something that I feel like I could never achieve in my home country, because the idea of having an ocean view lot or an overlooking lot is just so expensive, because as soon as you have that view, the price just skyrockets. But here in the Philippines,
and the insurance, right?
And yeah, I mean, just the whole idea of living near the ocean and having a view of the ocean is just so prohibitively expensive, in my opinion. I just felt like I could never achieve that in my home country, but here I think it could be achievable. So that was the other draw for Dauin, was I said, wow, look at these beautiful views. And they're also in other areas here in Dumaguete. Sibulan has hills that go up. So and Valencia has cool climates and also some nice views of the ocean. But there was something special about Dauin. And then recently, I mean really recently, more and more developments have popped up in that area. They just built a new little shopping mall there. There's new restaurants and cafes and just cool attractions, if you will, popping up in Dauin all the time. And I feel like it's an area that I could grow with in the next 5 to 10 years. There's supposed to be a new international airport that's going in nearby Bacong, which is, you know, just right next to Dauin. So maybe someday I'm imagining, instead of flying into Dumaguete in downtown at the old World War II runway, that you actually land in Bacong at this new international airport, and now your drive home is pretty decent, pretty short, because you're right there. So that's part of the appeal. If you keep going up the mountain, you get into really nice, cool climates. There's like Mount Talinis is up there, where all the clean water comes from. There's coffee shops, you know, places like Baslay Coffee. They grow coffee there and make coffee. It's just a really beautiful area. So you have that mix of the ocean, the diving, and then the mountain with the views and the waterfalls and all that stuff. Just gorgeous. There's a specific thing I could mention, because I'm not mentioning all these businesses and places of attraction by name, but there's a place called Malazi, which is not only just a restaurant, but like an event center. And they had concerts there, and Angie and I went and saw a really famous Filipino band perform there, and the who's who of the area came. You know, the mayor of Dauin was there, and popular YouTubers, and it was really cool. So right in that little area of Dauin, you have like a really famous, popular Filipino band. That's pretty neat.
That to me is something that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough, is how much musical talent there is here in the Philippines. Everybody talks about the gorgeous nature, everybody talks about the friendly people, but some of the best singing I've ever heard in my life has been here in the Philippines. What are some of the concerts or maybe performances that come to your mind? Could you talk a bit about what that was like, and you know, is that something that you maybe see or hear about in Dumaguete or surrounding areas a lot?
What is more important to Filipinos than their music and love of music? I mean, it's ingrained in them. One of the most popular activities here, as you know, is karaoke singing, which is almost like a staple at any party. If you're having drinks and food and it's whatever it is, a birthday, a christening of a baby, you name it, there's going to be karaoke, there's going to be singing, because Filipinos love music and they love to sing. And it just brings them joy. You can just see how much joy it brings them. And you don't even have to be that good of a singer, although it is a little bit of a cliche that every Filipino is this amazing singer. You just sing your heart out and it doesn't matter. Concerts, I mean, anytime you're in downtown Dumaguete during some kind of festival or an important event or holidays, inevitably you'll see a stage set up and a performer or local group, local bands, or another band or a group from another island like Cebu or Manila will come in and entertain the crowd, and it'll just be packed. And they love it. You know, Filipinos love singing, dancing, entertainment. One of the most popular shows on television is a daytime variety show where it's all about singing and dancing and humor, being funny. So it's here as well. It's here in Dumaguete, and it's in every major bar and restaurant. They typically on a Thursday or Friday or Saturday night, you're going to hear live music being played. Or sometimes if they can't afford a whole band, it'll just be one or two people singing to like a track, you know. But they're still doing it, and people love it, and they sing along and they dance. The Malazi Center had a concert stage set up, and a very famous Filipino band called Aegis came and performed, and it's fronted by 3 female vocalists, and they came in. It's a little Dauin, and they were here, and everybody loved it.
So Kevin, you've got an upcoming trip to Manila planned. Could you share a bit about what's bringing you to Manila?
Sure. There's a reason why where I am in Dumaguete is actually not that far from an airport, even though it's just a domestic airport and not an international one, and that's because I do travel a lot. I fly back and forth in the United States. I go to places like Manila, and then from there I can get on a connecting flight to somewhere like Davao or, you know, what have you, Palawan or something. And that's one of the reasons why I'm near the airport, even though I'm here in Dumaguete. I want to be in a provincial rural area, but I don't want to be so far away that the airport is hours away, like I've got to drive there. So again, you know, before I even say why I'm going to Manila, it's like I want to make sure that I do have the best of both worlds, where I am in a provincial area where I feel I can, you know, be close to nature and a slower pace of life, but I also want to be able to hop on that plane and go into town, go into the city when I need to. In this case, it's to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. Here we are, it's 2025. 80 years ago, the Americans returned. MacArthur promised that he would come back and liberate the Philippines from the Japanese, and he did. And so there's a conference that's happening, and it's in Intramuros, and it's called War in Memory, and it's a 80-year anniversary kind of remembrance of events that happened during that time, and how, you know, the Philippines was rescued from the Japanese. So I get to go up there. We'll fly up. We'll spend the night, a couple nights. Go to the conference. It's a 2-day conference, and we'll fly back.
Yeah.
And it's great. And the flights are pretty cheap and affordable. And you know, we find a decent place to stay, and that's not, you know, it doesn't break the bank. And I know my way around Manila, you know, because just from being there so many times. It's a fun trip, and it's something that's easy to do, and I love being able to just hop on a flight and go.
I think, you know, some guys are saying, oh, I could never live in Manila, but what you're saying is that even the guy or gal who chooses to live in Dumaguete, they can go up there for a weekend trip. It's not out of question for you.
Yeah, you're not isolated here and stuck here. You know, there are some places that you do want to be careful, because what if you do feel trapped? Like, let's say you lived on a smaller island that you would have to take a boat to go to a bigger island and then fly. You're a little bit more isolated, and not even getting into health concerns. Like, let's say, God forbid, you had a health emergency. How easy is it for you to be transported to, you know, a bigger hospital, in Manila or something? So I like that. I like the convenience of being able to just get on a flight and go to Manila. And Manila has its own charm. Again, I'm a little bit more history oriented. Like, I love the historical aspect of a city that goes back hundreds of years, back when the Spanish were here. It's just got so much culture in its, and the food, and I mean, the history, the city itself. it's just a wonderful place to visit. Again, I wouldn't live there by choice, but it's a great place to visit.
So I wanted to bring things home and give you a chance. Could you plug your social media if somebody wants to get in touch with you, and then I'll also give you the final word.
Sure, thank you, Alex. I'm not that big on content creation. I do it for fun. I do have a YouTube channel that's called Kevin Sound Mixer. If you wanted to check it out, you're welcome. You're welcome to. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I work in film and television, so I love to talk to people about that as well. And I do have people who contact me and ask me specifically about sound for film and TV, because that's what I do. And yeah, if you're interested in things like that, World War II history, living in the Philippines, feel free to hit me up. I generally will get back to people and say hello, and I'm always down to talk to someone. So thank you for the opportunity to be on your channel, and I wish you all the best as you
so much, Kevin.
go on your journey.
You're so generous with your time with us today and with the audience, and I know everybody will really appreciate your perspective. You have such a nuanced experience in the Philippines, and yeah, thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.